Welcome to this year's Drucker Challenge Digital Information Session. Thank you everyone for joining, and I can see a lot of people are still joining, so we'll give them a few more seconds.
I can see a young entrepreneur joining. Let me look at the name. Richard Straub. Yeah, so I've heard that name before.
Richard Straub, that is our founder and president of the Global Peter Drucker Forum. Great to see you, Richard, and welcome. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to learn more about the Global Peter Drucker Forum's celebrated International Essay Contest. Your chance to engage with some of the globe's leading management thinkers, and for some of you, even to join us in person for our annual conference in Vienna. My name is Jyoti Guptara, and I'm a business storytelling consultant and the author of Business Storytelling from Hype to Hack. What's more, I've had the privilege of serving multiple times as a Drucker Challenge judge, and I always learn so much from reading the essays. Today, we're going to explore what exactly the Drucker Challenge is, why you should participate, and how to maximize your chances of success. And there's more. We'll also be hearing from world-class speakers and from former Drucker Challenge laureates. Now, before we do that, I'm going to get really vulnerable with you and share something personal. But today's also about hearing from you. So as I share, I would love to have your reactions in the chat, just so I feel doubly vulnerable with you, okay? Now, we do look forward to your comments and questions, which you can write in the chat, and that we will have two specially designated blocks for you to ask these questions and have them answered by our speakers. But I want to kickstart and open the chat with something a little bit more. Everybody to ensure they're on mute as you join. I know sometimes you're not automatically muted, so sorry if that's the case, and thank you. So I'm going to share something personal now, and you can light up the chat, make it nice and colorful because it's storming outside. It's a bit gray where I am in Switzerland. I know Asia, in some parts of East Asia, it might be getting dark in the evening. Good evening to our Asian friends. Good morning to our friends in the Americas. So as I share, please light up the chat with some emojis, because I know that's something that my generation of millennials and Gen Z is really good at, and a little bit more trigger happy with the emojis maybe than some of our more senior colleagues. Now, the wonderful Drucker Challenge team always comes up with timely and thought-provoking essay topics, but this year's topic is something that is especially close to my heart, and you'll see why in a moment. See, my first career was as a novelist. I published my first book when I was 17 years old, and I got to do multiple book tours in different countries. But when I was 18, I remember I went on my first book tour of the USA, and there was one story that I was not allowed to tell. My hosts forbade me from sharing, I think, my most interesting story with the kids, a dark secret, which was that I was a school dropout. Why did they forbid me from sharing that story? The thing is, in Los Angeles, every other person, every other teenager wanted to drop out of school and become a rapper or a dancer, or maybe a tech billionaire. But the truth is, I myself had dropped out of school when I was 15. When I was 15, I knew what I wanted to do with my life, which was to become a writer. So I quit school, and that's what I did. So you don't become a writer by sitting in lecture halls and listening to people, though there's nothing wrong with that. You become a writer by doing just that. You read as much as you can and you write. And I'm just checking the chat here because it's great to see everyone's greetings. And do weigh in with your emojis about this topic, even as I share my story. So I'm on book tour in the USA, and I'm not allowed to share part of my personal journey for fear that this might inspire other young people to drop out of school and become reprobate. Maybe I should say that it was a huge risk, my dropping out of school when I was 15. And it did take 2 more years for me to get my first contract with the first publisher and go on to have that become a bestseller, and which led to these book tours and so on. So it ended up paying off for me personally in this particular case, but we tend to hear the stories that work out, don't we? Now, don't get me wrong, I have huge respect for formal education. In fact, I'm very proud whenever I get invited to teach at a place like MIT or Oxford, even though, to be honest, I still don't have a degree. Because the proper thing to do is to get an education, right? Well, that's what we're here to find out. What does that even mean? The next education, that is the topic of this year's Global Peter Drucker Challenge, how a new generation must be equipped to lead in a crazy world. We're about to hear from two absolutely world-class speakers. Ashish Advani was a successful technology entrepreneur before becoming CEO of Junior Achievement Worldwide. Laurent Chouin is the Chief Leadership, Education and Culture Officer of Mazars, the accounting and consulting group. So we're going to have two short, inspiring talks before getting down to the nitty-gritty details of how to participate in the Drucker Challenge, which will be led by my colleague Esther Clark, who actually happens to have won one of the previous Drucker Challenges. Now get ready to welcome our first speaker. I'd like to answer one question which somebody asked. Yes, this will indeed be recorded. And thank you everyone for writing your questions, even as we hear from our first speaker. Ashish Advani, as I said, is the president and CEO. JA is one of the largest nonprofits in the world serving youth. They work with 400,000 volunteers, serving 15 million youth in 115 countries. And they help these young people by helping them to build skills that employers seek, and entrepreneurs need. And under Ashish's leadership, this is, I think, hot off the press, JA has gone on to new heights and has just been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for the second time. Congratulations, Ashish, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Elsa, for this invitation. It's my honor to be able to share a few words, hopefully something of concrete take-home value. That's my goal, concrete take-home value for all of you. I know you're all waiting to ask the administrative questions about the essay, so I'll try to make this brief and also try to make it somewhat relevant for all of you. So you may be aware of this statistic, but I'll start by sharing that on average, young people who are graduating from university are going to have at least 20 jobs and at least 7 different careers. At least 20 jobs and 7 different careers. That's a lot of change that perhaps past generations haven't had to endure. Which means the skill sets that you'll need to navigate at least 20 jobs and at least 7 careers will include having to deal with some involuntary transitions. In other words, you might get fired maybe multiple times over the course of your career. That is something that for a lot of people requires a certain degree of confidence and self-belief to get through those challenging times, or at least to look at them as opportunities, not as failures. So how do we develop this ability to navigate the job market of the future? How do we develop this self-confidence, more than self-confidence, more than self-belief? The term we at JA like to use is self-efficacy. Some of you may already be familiar with this concept. In fact, I'm guessing there's some people who actually went through Junior Achievement or Young Enterprise or InJAWS, any of our brands around the world who are on this call, in which case you may be already exposed to this concept. But I'm guessing most of you haven't heard of this concept called self-efficacy. And I do know that you can't use this in your essay because it is not a Peter Drucker concept. So at least I'm telling you something that I can't give you an unfair advantage over the other essay entrants. Okay, so self-efficacy is this self-belief, this unshakable self-belief that allows you to get through very, very difficult times. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a manager, whether you're a
Sorry, Ashish, I've lost you. Can everyone else still hear Ashish? Ashish, maybe pull out your earplugs. For some reason, we lost you.
Okay, is it better?
Perfect. We have you again. Thank you, Ashish.
Okay. So as we navigate this job market of the future and have to think about how to build self-efficacy, I'm going to give you a few very concrete things that you can do. One, you surround yourself with people who will give you positive feedback and encourage you to succeed. This is something that many of you probably have already thought about, but let me tell you that this is beyond just having a few friends say you're going to succeed. This is beyond your parents saying that you can succeed. In order for you to develop this mindset, this idea that you'll actually be able to persevere through challenges, let me tell you a story. So when I was young, I moved from India to Canada when I was young. And for some reason, during that transition, I developed a stammer, a stutter. So I wasn't able to express myself. When I landed in Canada, I found myself unable to speak. I found myself having the kind of stutter that wasn't just quick repetitions, but I literally couldn't get words out of my mouth. So between the age of 6 and the age of 13, I had a very difficult time speaking. And my parents enrolled me in an after-school program at a hospital. And I used to go on Wednesday after school to learn, frankly, how to speak. And one of the things I learned from that experience is I learned to become a very good extemporaneous speaker. We were given topics that I had to speak about, which I hadn't prepared for, but I had to do it very carefully, slowly, and thoughtfully. And I learned to change words in my head, because when you stutter, you anticipate the words you're going to actually stutter on, so you can use a synonym to change the word. So if I knew I was going to stutter on the word synonym, I would say, I would change to something that is similar or is a word that means the same thing. So I learned to change words in my head very rapidly. And that skill ended up helping me with public speaking later on in my life as my speech became better and better. So by the age of 18, I actually didn't stutter anymore, and I could be a very confident public speaker. That's an example of how you actually start to get to have other people respect you, because when I started to win awards for public speaking, I started to think of myself not as somebody who stuttered, but somebody who was able to make that a strength, make that public speaking a strength. So as you think about how to build self-efficacy, one of the first ways is you get positive feedback from people around you. You win awards, you get external validation, not just internal validation. The second way that you can build self-efficacy is you can surround yourself or get introduced to role models who have the same background as you. So I'm going to ask a question in the chat now. I'm wondering if any of you already have a role model. Just indicate yes or no. Just indicate if you have somebody in your life you consider a role model who is somebody you look up to. I see a lot of yeses. Excellent. So one of the reasons I ask this question is the way you should pick your role models is very important. If you pick role models who have nothing like you in their background, people who've got completely different background as you. Let's say you're a young person. I think I saw somebody who said earlier they were from Kenya in the chat. If you're from Kenya and you pick Richard Branson as your role model, he may have a totally different background than you. But if you pick somebody from Kenya who went to your high school and achieved what you want to achieve, or went to your university or had the same job as you, and they've achieved what you want to achieve, that starts to change your mental model for what you're capable of. So I encourage you to think about role models who actually can help you break the mental barrier, that click in your mind that allows you to succeed. And the third and last way, I'm going to just give you these concrete tips. So the first was to surround yourself with people who give you positive feedback and encourage you. The second is to pick role models with the same background as you. And the third is to learn to take negative thoughts and to make them positive. So how do you take negative thoughts and make them positive? Well, one way, and there's many ways to do this, but one way is to learn to show gratitude by converting a neutral or a negative into a positive. So in my family, what we do is, and I did this with my sons daily, we would take things we're grateful for, but we'd start off with the words even though or despite. So even though we've had technical problems on this call, I'm so grateful to be able to share these lessons with all of you and feel inspired by speaking with you and hearing from you. So practice this idea of taking a neutral or a negative by starting your gratefuls with despite or even though. If you can master these three techniques, it will help you develop the self-confidence to navigate the job market of the future. Beyond self-esteem, beyond self-confidence, is self-efficacy. So I'm going to pause there. I've been working on a book which comes out in a month, which talks about the skills that young people need with 30 lessons. One of the lessons in the book actually is to make friends with people 5 to 10 years older than you. So that's one of the concrete lessons that we have in the book. It's co-authored with Marshall Goldsmith. It ties into some of the great work that Richard Straub has been doing with sort of planning the next education, planning the next management. And I'm really delighted to be able to share some of these lessons with you. It gets me very animated. I'm happy to answer any questions you have either later on today or via LinkedIn later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashish. Big virtual applause for our first inspiring speaker. Ashish was an absolute highlight of our in-person Global Peter Drucker Forum in Vienna. So I'm so glad you were able to join us for this as well, Ashish. Thank you. What a wonderful practical way of building self-confidence and creating a positive feedback loop so that we can improve ourselves. Next up, we have the privilege of hearing from someone who has believed in and supported the Drucker Challenge for many years. Laurent Chouin is, as I mentioned, the Chief Leadership, Education and Culture Officer at Mazars, the International Audit, Accounting and Consulting Group. He's also CEO of Mazars University. In fact, Laurent has helped many other corporations set up their own internal universities. Now, Laurent must have had an incredible education because he went on to have not just one, but 4 successful careers. So it sounds like Laurent had an inkling of what was coming and what Ashish just shared with us, that at some point, young people were going to have to master maybe 7 different careers and have a lot more jobs than earlier. So Laurent demonstrates being ahead of the curve. Laurent has been a senior executive in large companies, including Kempinski Hotels. He was a lecturer on leadership and organization design, a dean who led executive education. And third and fourth, in terms of these careers, Laurent has also been a successful consultant himself, as well as an entrepreneur like Ashish, who was a very successful tech entrepreneur who sold one of his companies to Richard Branson at Virgin. Perhaps I should have mentioned that as well by way of inspiration. So how wonderful it is to have these 2 inspiring individuals who really walked the talk. Laurent, we can't wait to hear from you now. And just before you start, Laurent, a quick reminder that I appreciate that everyone has muted themselves so that we can hear our speak as well. Thank you, everybody. Laurent.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. Actually, women, that's my answer, Ashish. So most of my role models were women. Actually, that's the answer I would give to your question. Second, well, 20, yes. 20 jobs for 7 careers. Actually, I had a slightly different approach of this. Let me explain. First of all, for everyone here, you know the Big 4? You've heard about the Big 4, KPMG, EY, Deloitte, PwC. We are not one of them. That's the best definition of Mazars. So that's, and you don't need to know more about us. It's enough. Only 40,000 people, so much smaller. So we keep it a little bit human. And second, also present in 103 countries at the moment, which makes my job very interesting and international in a way, but also 28 years of age in average. So this is typically the average age of the people you would like to have in the Drucker Challenge, between 18 and 35, according to the new rules. And the average age is 28 in my organization. So an old guy is 29, and there is no old women. So that's the beauty of it. But so I'm a very, very old person in this. Actually, Ashish, interestingly enough, in 1991, I had 4 different jobs, but at the same time. So let me explain why, in my view, this is the future of employability. By the way, at Mazars, we only sell two things in employer branding: employability for life, friends for life. Employability for life, very easy to understand. Most people, 95% of the people at Mazars won't stay at Mazars. So we don't consider it a career. We consider it a great start for fresh grads. So it means that once you graduate, join us and you will have a nice life. By the way, more than 1/3 of the people joining us, when you ask them, if not Mazars, what would it have been? And they say, well, anything, but not in this industry. So which shows one thing. They don't join us for what we do, audit, consulting, and so on, but for who we are. And that's where the link with the second part is important. Make it fun and make sure that people will enjoy joining this organization. And second, that they will make friends for life. So that's the only two promises we make. The rest we can't make. This is not an option. But you know what? 3 years ago, we actually made a decision, which was to remove the exclusivity clause in our work contracts. So what does it mean? It means that when we hire people, we tell them, please don't give us 100% of your energy, of your time, of your talent. The life is too short to focus only on one thing. And who would we be to say you should actually dedicate everything you are to a company, to an organization? We don't believe in it. We think that a good life is much more made, as Charles Andy, by the way, Charles Andy, if it wouldn't be called the Drucker Challenge, we could call it the Charles Andy Challenge, because actually there is so much commonality between these two great thinkers that definitely you can be inspired by Charles as much as by Peter. The thing is that Charles Andy explained this very smartly. And he said in the 80s, the beginning of the 80s, you know, organization will be less and less made of full-time employees. And if you look today, it's the case. Probably in an organization where you live in, probably the person at the reception is not an employee of your company. Simple as that. But you know what? They live in your company. They know everyone in your company. So Charles described it as saying this will be a shamrock organization tomorrow, not made only of the core of the organization, but a lot of people, contractors, consultants, whatever, who will be living in the same workplace and actually will be also building your firm. So, but if companies and organizations are organized like this, why would people only consider working in one organization and having this full-time contract? No. That's what I did in 1991, actually. I immediately understood one thing. If you want to be free, don't be an entrepreneur, by the way. You know, I was one. But there are multiple advantages to be an entrepreneur, but certainly not to be free, because you don't sleep at night. You're always thinking of your clients. You're always thinking of your organization, the people, and so on and so forth. So if you want some worries, if you don't want to actually sleep too much at night, be an entrepreneur. Again, I have been and I'm still today myself an entrepreneur. I know what I'm talking about. No, if you want to be free, make sure that you multiply the employers. You make sure that you just not depend on one, not only for your job, but also for your employability, as Ashish would say. So what does it mean? It means that if really we want to see what the future of work will be, like Charles said, if organizations are getting organized in shamrock way, so having different kind of people working for them, in front of this, everyone should consider organizing their life as a portfolio of activity, as working as an employee at Mazars, but maybe also working for Ashish in an NGO, and also at night being a DJ, and then also being a photographer at the Fashion Week, or today being an influencer in Dubai. But at the end of the day, don't do only one thing, because employability comes from the variety of what you're doing, you see? So that's the very important thing, and that's why, even if you're working today as a student or an entrepreneur, give also 100%, because you have to give 4 times 100% in a way in many things you do, but do it for the Drucker Challenge. Become a writer, if not a professional one, at least a very well-educated amateur one. And by the way, doing this, like Jyoti would say, then you will become later on probably professionally good at this. My last comment will be this. You're going to write an essay. And what have we done before? Jyoti, Ashish, every one of us here. We have respected 4 things that you will find in any storytelling. A good storytelling is about 4 things, and actually a good essay will be about 4 things as well. One is you need to create a reason to care. Why would we care? Why are you caring to what I'm saying now? I mean, second, you need to create and generate a reason to believe, because making people would care about what you write is one thing, but they need to believe that what you're going to say makes sense, and who is going to talk also makes sense. So the second thing is a reason to believe. Then create a need to know, an appetite to know more, which will lead to the 4th dimension, which is an appetite to do. And you see, if you have these 4 constituencies, number 1, a reason to care. Number 2, a reason to believe. Number 3, a need to know. And number 4, a need to do. Only with this, whatever you do, answering a tender because you're a Mazarian consultant, and then you would try to get a wonderful NGO as the one of Ashish for you as a client, or just writing an essay for the Drucker Challenge, or presenting in 3 minutes at the gala dinner at the Drucker Forum. It's always the same 4 things. A need to care, a reason to care, a reason to believe, a need to know, and a need to do. And that's what we expect from these essays. You can be a manager, you can be a student, whatever it is, it's always the same story. So that's what I wanted to say. And Jyoti, thank you very much for the nice introduction, but the best is probably now to answer the questions that people would have.
Exactly. Laurent, thank you so much. Everybody join me in giving a big virtual thanks to Laurent Schwan. I found it fascinating.
As the German would say.
I did not know about Mazar's very counter-cultural and very encouraging way of working. This gives me hope in the future of employers. So thank you very much. I'm sure that was very interesting for all of us to hear. And if you want to be free, don't become an entrepreneur. I'm sure Ashish can also vouch for the veracity of that. We've had 2 wonderfully inspiring speakers already, and it would be such a shame to let them go. So I'm going to invite Ashish to join Laurent and myself as we have a little discussion and as we attempt to answer any questions that I'm sure have come up as a result of hearing these 2 short but provocative and very practical talks. I have a question to start us off, Ashish and Laurent. You both have had a very accomplished career and education. If you were responsible today as a young person for your educational journey, and I know you've already given some practical tips, but if you had to do things again, you were a young person today, would you do the same thing as you did in terms of becoming an educated individual, or would you do things differently?
Laurent, you go first. I'm curious.
One interesting thing with what you said at the beginning, Jyoti, is that, again, I was a little bit counter-stream here. It's not that I dropped out. I never got engaged, or let's say I never dropped out. In other words, as you can see, I'm actually 32 plus. So no, I'm almost 60. So it means that my first education dates back to the 80s. But guess what? I never stopped learning. I have always been an everlasting student. That's my definition. And even when I had completed my PhD, after that I did another degree, which is a postdoctorate degree. You know what? Actually, I did a degree to supervise PhDs. The reason is very simple to understand. It's the only way I found to go on learning, but through other people. Vicarious education, if you want. You learn through others. Because I was limited. I could have done another PhD. I was very interested in psychology, but my wife, it is her job. So I didn't want, to play on her playground because it's also her image, her standings and whatever. So I didn't want to compete, having another PhD in this. So I said to myself, what is the way for me to go on learning? And the answer was Okay, let's supervise PhD of other people. And then you go on doing other PhD every year, and many of them, by the way. So you see, in my view, there is a difference between dropping out and being an everlasting student. And I suspect that, Jyoti, you are yourself an everlasting student, even if you decided to drop out. So for me, that's the point. And the same, the Drucker essay here, at one point, we should give a degree to this in a certain way, because writing an essay like this one is as important as writing, a kind of synthesis or thesis at the end of the master degree or whatever. It's the same. So it's something that actually is worth. This is what we call badging at the moment in education. And if you're asking what is the big shift at the moment, that would be, in my view, the shift. We come from diplomas to badging much more. So what we call snackable and stackable contents. And that's the evolution. The two evolutions for me are this one, and the second one is also that the system of learning are no longer organized to think of the learners, the teachers, sorry, but more and more about the experience of the students or of the learners. This is what we call the shift between LMS, Learning Management System, to LXP, which means Learning Experience Platforms. And that's, for me, the two big shifts that we are fortunately experiencing at the moment.
Thank you, Laurent. Ashish, I know you have two, I think, teenage sons still. Have you encouraged them to do anything differently than you did yourself in terms of their education?
Well, absolutely. The first thing I would say is, and Laurent said this as well, when you teach, you end up learning much more than when you learn, if that makes much sense. So if you can put yourself in environments where you're teaching others, your rate of learning is so much faster than if you're just a passive learner, effectively. And for my own boys, I've definitely been pushing them. Unfortunately for them, pushing is probably the right word. Pushing them to put themselves in environments which allow them to teach others. I'll also say one more thing. As we get to this world of snackable and credentials over degrees and skills over brands, I think one thing which we're all going to have to realize is at some moment in our life when we're going through a difficult transition, we may have to rely on that one brand or that one element of credibility that came either early in our career or mid in our career. So I always encourage, I'll say this for my sons and not for all of you, just get one thing in your past and your resume and in your experience set and your confidence that makes you say that's something which is a brand that people recognize and understand. Once you have that, everything else, all the risk-taking becomes so much easier. So I know that's a little bit counterintuitive sometimes compared to some of the other advice that we hear, but I do believe it's going to be increasingly important in a world where people are doing many different things.
Absolutely. And I was encouraged by both of what you shared, because it seems like I myself may not have made so many mistakes on my own educational journey after all. Now, if in closing, you had to pick one skill that you find young people tend not to have so much these days, but employers are looking for, or maybe you'll choose to go for the entrepreneurial route, but one skill that you feel is underrated, what would that skill be?
For me, that's easy, and it's so tied to this essay context, which is writing. Instead of text message emoji writing, this idea of actually being thoughtful and detailed and becoming an exceptional writer, I think, is a critical life skill.
Yes, that's, as well as it becomes rarer and rarer. So that's interesting. The second thing that also I think is important is to, the difference, it exists in French, but also especially in American. They make the difference between Faulkner and Hemingway. Faulkner could write a sentence that would last something like 3 pages, without a dot and so on. And it's very articulated. By the way, a non-native speaker couldn't read it. I've tried many times, or even Mark Twain sometimes. It's really very literarian. If you know about Ernest Hemingway, it's quite the contrary. Hemingway one day did a contest with some friends, Fitzgerald and all of these people, and he said, I bet that I would be the one who can write the shortest story in the world. And everybody started to write the shortest story in the world. And Hemingway came with a story of 6 words. And this is the story, by the way. For sale, baby shoes, never used. 6 words. But then you have a story behind. You can start imagining what it means and so on. So what I would advise you is to know how to start writing in the Hemingway style. By the way, you can even ask ChatGPT to take a text and you say, write it in the Hemingway style. And you will see it's very interesting because the thing is clever. It's going to be something like, of course, it's not Hemingway, but sounds like a little bit, and with this kind of shortening the story. So I would say keep it short and simple. That's probably what will get you not to the Nobel Prize with Ashish, but to the Nobel Prize in Literature, which is not bad.
Laurent, thank you so much. And it's very fascinating that both of you have emphasized the writing and the storytelling. Yeah. And Laurent, I appreciated your storytelling tips. So I can't wait to read this year's
I must tell you,
essay.
It's not mine. It's from a firm, a South African firm. The first time I heard it, I found it very compelling. They are called Boredom Slayers. If you have the opportunity to check what they do, it's really great. And I remember I heard something like this a few years ago. So I just reformulated it with my words, but it's close to what they say as well.
That is the power of stories. They are highly memorable. Ashish and Laurent, thank you so much for sharing your time.
Ashish wanted just to ask a question, Jyoti. Yeah.
No. I was just going to say, in Hemingway style, in less than 6 words, we both said writing and storytelling. So it should be more like Jyoti. Basically, that's the advice we're giving. Be more like Jyoti.
Done deal. Absolutely.
I'll have to ask for permission to quote you on that, Ashish. Thank you so much, both of you. We have received so much food for thought already, and no doubt inspiration for our essays, talking of which, this is the next part of our call today. I know you're all very curious about some nitty-gritty questions, which we started to answer in the chat. So shepherding us through the next part of today's information session is Esther Clark, herself at the forefront of education technology. She is Executive Director of Marketing for Online Schools at Inspired Education Group. And isn't that the perfect name for our theme? And as I mentioned, Esther Clark is the perfect person to share about the Drucker Challenge with us because she herself is a Drucker laureate. And I believe your essay, Esther, was on managing complexity. And so, again, you're very well qualified to shepherd us through this next part of the call.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And I learned a lot listening to the speakers today, and I hope you have too. What I will do is I will give all of you a brief introduction about what the challenge is. I think it will pick up some of the questions that I've been seeing in the chat. So I'd like to start off with that introduction. And then we'll get into the engaging part of the event where you can put your questions in the chat. You can do that, you put the questions in the chat now if you'd like, and some of my colleagues will be answering them, but also it's a chance for you to put on your mic and ask a question in a little bit. But let me first start off with a brief introduction. The Drucker Challenge, what is it? It is an international essay contest. So it's held annually every year, and it's hosted by the Drucker Society Europe, and it's in conjunction with the Drucker Forum. So just some housekeeping, both of those have great websites, and the Drucker Challenge has a great website with lots of frequently asked questions on there, questions and answers, and lots of the guidelines that I will be going through today. So the Drucker Challenge, very exciting. The theme for this year's challenge is the next generation, the next education. So the next education is the theme for this year. And there are some questions that you will find on the landing page of the Drucker Challenge website. It shows and it guides you what kind of questions you can ask yourself before you embark on writing the essay. All essays must be in English. So I know that was a question in the chat. So all essays must be in English. English doesn't have to be your first language, but it needs to be written in English. You can use references, And of course, we encourage you to use references from other cultures and language and countries. In my particular experience, I drew on my experience living in Latin America, in Quito, Ecuador, for my essay. So encourage you guys to make it as personal and resonate with you as much as possible. In terms of how many rounds are there, I've heard, questions about what this actually looks like. So there are 3 rounds. The first round, and you must submit your essay by this date, is the 31st of May. That is the deadline for submitting your essay. So no submissions after that date will be reviewed. So make sure that you get your essay in on time. The other thing to stress is just make sure that it meets the theme of this year's Drucker Challenge. It's really exciting and important to make it your own, to do your research, to tie it into your ideas around Peter Drucker and his writings and articles, but make sure you do stick to the theme. And again, on the page, the web page of the Drucker Challenge, there's lots of questions there to guide you in what that looks like. There will be 3 rounds of judging. So the first one is the essay submission by the 31st of May. I'm going to keep saying that date so you guys remember it. And then there's 2 additional rounds. And just so I get it right, the second round is where the committee looks at towards the final challenge winners, and they look at them, and then there's an opportunity for you to submit a video recording. Now, this video recording is an enhancement of your essay. It's not a replacement of it. And you will be asked to submit a video recording, and it just gives the judges a bit more of context and color around what your essay is about. So that's in the second round. And then the third round is in early August, and that's when the International Jury of Business People and Academics, we identify the winner for each category. And just to give you a bit of idea about the criteria that the judges look at. Criteria is you're looking at personal insights and original thoughts about the topic. And here I'm just going to mention that we do not want you to use any AI solutions for the writing of your essay. We want it to be original. We want to hear your thoughts and your perspective. It should be in a storytelling style. We've already heard this, earlier today, how important it is to tell a story and to bring the reader through on that journey with you. It does need to be in English, and your research and citations of primary and secondary sources are important. So if you are referring to other sources, please make sure to state them. And we do encourage that your conclusions or your essay draws on Peter Drucker's works, whether it's his books or articles. If you're not able to access a book, a lot of his articles and writings are available online, and there's lots and lots of resources on the Peter Drucker forum itself, lots of information that you can draw upon there as well. So general terms and conditions, we do ask that you submit your essay on time in order to proceed to the next 2 rounds. The submission must be original. So as I mentioned, no generative AI solutions allowed, and it can't be published elsewhere previously. So just make sure it is original and it is your own. And then I guess the kind of, again, the eligibility, I've noticed about some questions about age. So it's 18 to 35 inclusive. So 18 to 35 at the submission deadline, May 31st. So some people ask, I'm going to have a birthday, I'm going to be 36, when actually the challenge happens in November, the Drucker Forum happens in November. That's fine, as long as you meet the deadline of being 35 on that submission deadline date. You do have to be a student or an entrepreneur. So I'll just read out what the student criteria is here. Bachelor's, master's, MBA, PhD, that is the student category. And the other category is young professionals, entrepreneurs, again, 18 to 35 years old. So you can check all of the eligibility. There's guidelines on the website, so please check that. And we'll get over to your questions right away. So I'm just looking at the chat here, and I see that there are quite a few questions here. I think I've answered quite a few of them, and my great colleagues are answering them as we speak. So I'm just going to open the floor to any questions that people have. If you'd like to raise your hand, I will call on you, and make sure that when you ask your question, it is in the form of a question. And if you can also state your name and where you're calling from, that would be excellent. So is it all right if I start the open questions, Jyoti? We'll just start with the first one there. Okay, I am looking at the first one that I see here, Mubarak. I'm going to ask you to unmute and ask your question, please. And don't forget to tell us your name and where you're from.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. But I'm sorry I cannot open my camera. My name is Mubarak from Indonesia, and nice to meet you, Miss Esther. So I have two questions. Maybe it's regarding the technical requirements for the contest. So the first one is for the undergraduate and actually have two experiences. I mean, like less than 2 years of working experience. Can we categorize that as a student category? Because I think it's just based on stated on the requirements that we still young professional, but I think that it's still stated as a student category, or maybe it could be stated as a professional one. So I think I just want to have that clarification. And also the second question is, what are the distinctive evaluations or for the Peter Drucker? I mean, like several winners of this Peter Drucker challenge really relate the work of Peter Drucker or other philosophers in the essay. So I mean, sometimes it's not that authentic when we state or take the statement from the philosopher. So do we need that philosopher statement to be the ammunition for the essay rather than the original or distinctive opinion regarding the essay? Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for that. I think we have a couple of answers in the chat there, but I will, I guess I'll speak to the last part of your question in terms of what sources you use. We encourage you to look at the works of Peter Drucker. We also encourage you to look at other management thinkers. I think earlier today, Charles Handy was mentioned. He has some great books that you could read and delve into. So you are welcome to use philosophers, philosophy from other countries, other languages, etc., as long as the essay is in English and it is your original work. So we do encourage that. And then I think for the first question, if one of my colleagues could suggest an answer to that in the chat, I would be most grateful. And then so we can move on to the next question. I am trying to keep the questions going here so we can get to as many people as possible. So the next person I see is Fils Jean-Pierre Muzzini. I will ask you to say your name and where you're coming from, and also to please share your question. I don't believe I hear you. Could you just check your audio is working? Your mic is working. Sorry about that. I still don't hear you. We might come back to you if that's okay. I'll check in with you in just a minute. I'm going to go to someone else, if that's all right. I'm going to go to Kadia Hassan, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Esther. I wanted to ask about citations. What kind of citations would you guys prefer?
So I think the question was what citations or what form of citations you use. I know it's in the FAQ, so if someone can put it in the chat there, we do ask you to follow a certain citation format. Is that the question that you had? Sorry, you broke up a little bit there. Okay. All right. I will move on back to Jean-Pierre. Would you like to try again? Sorry, I still can't hear you.
Okay,
Sorry about that. We're going to move on to the next one that I see. I think it's Joshua that I see with your hand up. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope I can be heard. Yes, my name is Komi Joshua. I'm doing this call from Kenya. And my question is pretty simple. It's on those categorization. You've mentioned that on the student category, we can have bachelor's, master's, etc. So I just wanted to ask whether if someone has finished their bachelor's degree, they're pursuing their postgraduate diploma, whether that still would suffice within the student category. Thank you.
Right. So to answer that question, I think it related to a question earlier on as well. it's whether it's a student or manager, it really depends on your main occupation. So if you consider yourself to be a student, a current student, whether that's bachelor's, master's, PhD, doctorate, then that would be the student category that you would apply to. If your main occupation is manager entrepreneur, so you're working rather than being a student, then you would apply to the manager entrepreneur category. There is a bit of a description on the FAQs to guide you, and I think my colleague has put the link in the chat as well for you. So I hope that answers your question. I'm going to move on to the next one. Nadia, I see you with your hand raised.
My question was answered in the chat. So I wanted to clarify about previous winners, but I just saw that they answered in the chat. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Nadia. And just again, to reiterate, there's two categories. There's the student category as well as the entrepreneur manager category. So there's two categories. They're separate. We're not competing for the same prize. Jean-Pierre, I'm gonna check and see if this time is the one that works. I'll ask you to unmute, please.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderfully. I just wanted to come back on the question about mentioning the author's name, because I have seen it's not allowed, but for example, for the past winners, I've navigated, for example, for what they have written, and I found some of them they have included among the sources, like the links to the websites. And I think, for example, if someone is reading the website that may mention his name, I think there may be a problem there.
All right, so I think you're asking about if it's a blind review procedure for the submissions. And there's a really good answer on the question and answer. So I'm just going to read out to you. So the challenge effectively follows a single blind review procedure. So when you submit your essay, you do not submit it with your name. If your name is submitted, we will remove it before the judges see it. And this way, we will not see the name. The judges will not see the name when they're judging your essay. What it's not is not totally, I guess, officially not able to place kind of the place and the name and things like that, because in your essay, you may draw from your professional or personal experience. So you might, it's not completely anonymous, if you know what I mean. So for example, when I submitted my essay, I was writing about Quito, Ecuador, so they probably knew that I lived in Quito, Ecuador. But aside from that, it is not, you would not have your name on the actual essay, if that makes sense. I'm going to move on to the next person who I see has their hand raised, Maria Camila. If you'd like to go on, unmute yourself and just tell us where you're coming from and your question, please.
Hi, thank you for this session. Technically, I'm from Colombia, but I study in the US. And I have two quick questions. One is, what if I'm a student and also an entrepreneur? What category should I join? And then the second question, kind of like linked to this, is what are the, is there like a specific requirements in order to be considered an entrepreneur, like how big the company, like the size of the company, you know, any more details about that? Thank you.
Thanks very much. So as I mentioned on the Q&As, the frequently asked question Q&A page on the website, it does explain quite clearly the eligibility. So if you're a part-time student versus full-time student, if you are working for a business, or if you consider yourself an entrepreneur. So I'd really encourage you to look at that. I will ask my colleagues to put it in the chat. Thank you so much, Naira. That's great. She's put it in the chat there. So you can see how we define manager, the entrepreneur category, versus how we define the student category. Thank you so much for that. I think I've got around to all of the hands raised. If I can just call upon some of our other challenge winners that are here with me. Perhaps you would like to come on to the camera and explain a little bit about how you got, I guess, inspired to write your essay in terms of the theme. Because as I mentioned before, it's really important that the essay follows the theme of this year's contest, but how you kind of interpreted that. So if I could call on one of the challenge winners, please, that'd be great.
Hi, I can go and share some of my experiences. So I was one of the top 10 winners in 2012 and 2013. And I would advise that everybody should stick to the theme, read the abstract of the theme very, very thoroughly, because it raises some really important questions that you can answer in your essay. You really don't have to answer every question, but the ones that you really think, strike a chord with you. So it's really important to go through the theme that's on the website of the challenge and reflect on which questions really resonate with you. And I think, elaborate on that, use personal experiences, use stories. We are looking for original thought process. We are looking for something that you really resonate with and you want to share about next education, right? So I would really advise everyone to go through the abstract that's on the website and really reflect on it and then start writing your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And that actually reminded me of something, that if you've already submitted and you're attending this session and you think, oh my gosh, I forgot to say this or I forgot to include that, you can submit one update. So if you've already submitted and realize you want to resubmit, as long as you resubmit before the deadline and it's only one update, we will take the latest essay from you. So that's an important one to note. I see Milena is on. I can see your video. Milena, would you like to share a little bit about your experience in terms of the Drucker Challenge, please? Okay. I think that were the main ones that I wanted to highlight. I'm going to pass over to Jutta, if that's okay, to see if there's any other ones that we wanted to include or messages we wanted to include before we sign off today.
Yeah, I think Naira can share a few insights. Naira.
Hi, Naira. Thank you.
Do we need some host to unmute Nayara?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jyoti. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll be a bit quick because everything has been covered by Esther and our fellow speakers. Something I can tell you about the essay team right now is that there are some things that will definitely get you disqualified. The first of these is if you don't talk to the essay team, which is to just ramble or share an essay which isn't about the topic itself. Having said that, this is not an academic essay. Okay, we're not looking for a problem statement or a thesis or anything. This is a reflective essay. So draw on your experiences, draw on what you have observed about the world. And the great thing about the Peter Drucker challenge is that Peter Drucker did the same thing. He approached business as a moral science and he wrote extensively on society and so on. So you will find a lot of overlaps. Just be careful about that. We also get some questions about English not being a first language. That's not a problem. Just make sure you're understood. That's it for mine. Thank you. And that's it.
Thank you very much. I see that Milena, I'm going to see if I can unmute you to see if you can share your thoughts as well, because it is important to hear from the challenge winners in the past. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, doesn't seem to be working.
Thank you.
Oh, there we
Thank
go.
you. Fantastic. Sorry for the inconvenience. To add upon what ladies already said, I would just say that we need to about the age, about the participants' opportunities, that matters a lot. It happens sometimes that people miss to be included because they didn't follow the guidelines. So make sure that your essay is perfect in the sense of the word count, in the sense of the, admin things. The second thing is give your personal touch. As juries, unfortunately, we are seeing that some people are using AI and it tells and it shows so much. So make sure that what you are using is your personal story. You connect it to Drucker's philosophy, you connect it to your experience so far as a manager or a student. You may connect it to your hometown, your country, but give us your own experience. We want to contribute to the bigger picture, because this is the opportunity where you are actually talking about education, but you, in case you are chosen, you're becoming also part of the Drucker Challenge, and Peter, Global Peter, it's your topic, how you want to contribute to the topic beyond the essay challenge. Thank you.
That's great. Yes, important to follow the guidelines and, the word count and all of those things, because that could make you ineligible if you don't count on that. And again, 31st of May is the deadline. I did want to mention, because I forgot to mention at the very beginning, just the mission, the aim of the Drucker Challenge Essay Contest. And it's beautiful. It says to give voice to the young generation from all over the world, aimed at addressing the opportunities and challenges of our times in light of Peter Drucker's human-centered management philosophy. Just really important to keep that front and center as you write this. Be inspired, go to the website and follow the guidelines, follow some of those questions to kind of trigger some of your thought process. And there's lots of resources available both on the Drucker Challenge website as well as the Drucker Forum website. And it's such an amazing opportunity. I think all of us here that have been privileged enough to go to the challenge and be one of the finalists, it's just an amazing opportunity to meet so many great people that you might have a book of, and you can actually go and speak to them in person and ask your questions. And so it's an amazing opportunity for those winners. I will hand it back to our host, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Esther, for guiding us through this part of today with such clarity. And thank you to our previous Drucker laureates and team members, Javnica, Layara, and Milena. I love how many of our Drucker laureates remain so involved with the forum in various capacities. And Esther's been very humble, and I should have blown her horn more. So I should mention that Esther, for example, actually led the 2021 Forum's conference theme, which was learning and e-learning. Before I give thanks to our brilliant speakers again and others, I do want to just recap that submissions are open as of now. As you heard, you still have a great opportunity even to edit if need be. Another date, which was said multiple times, but I still want to say it once more, the submission deadline is May 31. And if you are a positive thinker, like Ashish Advani was encouraging us to be, then do mark your calendars November 14 and 15 for the Global Peter Drucker Forum in Vienna, so that you're ready to fly when your essay wins. Thank you so much to our IT team, Ashraf and others, and thank you to our other Drucker Forum team members and supporters. We've actually had some very senior individuals on this call to encourage you as the next generation of managers and entrepreneurs and leaders, which leads me to, again, this year's topic, which is the next education, how a new generation must be equipped to lead in a crazy world. And isn't it a crazy world? And don't we need the next generation of young leaders who are well equipped to help us all get through these crazy times? So we are all very excited to receive your essays. And I think today has been such a wonderful event with practical takeaways, both in terms of questions asked and answered, but also in terms of personal inspiration that we've received from Ashish and Laurent. Thank you both for being so personal and vulnerable with us. I love how you modeled how you turned weaknesses into strengths and inspired us, encouraged us to do the same. With that said, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you participants for asking your questions. Thank you for your interest, and thank you for engaging with the Drucker Challenge. All the very best to you all.